Well, hey, everybody. So glad to see you. We've gone all Netflix with our podcast. We're dropping seasons now. I don't know why it dawned on me sometime last year. It's like, why does anybody wait till a day and time of the week to tune into anything anymore? So we're just recording massive podcasts and releasing them all at once. You're in the middle of, or maybe it's your first episode of the season that as we record it, we're calling it. So I got to my new church, and then so did the pandemic. And we're interviewing people who we've had the honor of helping find their way to their church, or God found them to their church, or whatever your theology is. But we were in the equation somewhere, and now we're coming back and talking to them. We've talked to people who were elected through a Zoom meeting. We've talked to one guy who was his church did a drive-through voting where people could text the elders their vote. Can't imagine giving my whole congregation my cell phone number, but go elders. And now we're talking to my friend Eric Geiger, who's at Mariners Church. Eric had a little bit of time before the pandemic, but before we talk about that, Eric, maybe a little introduction and a little bit of your story just for people that may not know you.
Yep, I've been at Mariners Church, almost 2.5 years now as senior pastor. And before that, I was senior vice president at Lifeway Christian Resources. Before that, I was executive and teaching pastor in Miami at Christ Fellowship. And before that, I was in youth ministry for many years. And then before that, I did not know Jesus and grew up in the New Orleans area. Met the Lord senior year in high school, and then met my wife 2 years later in college, and now have two amazing daughters and live in the greatest place in the world.
Well, I just so appreciate you making time. I know you're busy. You guys have been open. You weren't maybe the very first to open. You've got a
Yep.
neighbor up the road that was open a little before you. You got
Yep.
neighbors all around that aren't open yet, but you're real busy, and I really appreciate you making the time.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
glad to, man.
If you watch our podcast on YouTube or listen, you've heard or seen Eric before, and it's just a pretty amazing story. So, Eric, you had a little bit of a run before the pandemic, right? I mean, tell us about that.
Yep, I started Labor Day of 18, and so the pandemic started March. We were kind of early here in California. I remember having a couple of friends out in late February of 2020, and people were already wearing masks. I mean, word had kind of gotten out, and Irvine, where the facility is that I'm doing this broadcast from, is in Irvine. Irvine's 42% Asian, and so there were people in that community who were alert to it before I was, before I knew of it. So before the pandemic began, it had been a really just an amazing 18-month time. I mean, Kenton B. Shore had been the senior pastor for 35 years before I got here, and just has been so amazing to me. He still is on our teaching team. We were in a fun growth spurt from the fall of 19 until the pandemic in 21. In 20, and we were seeing a lot of new people meet the Lord. We had grown a good bit. We had launched new services. I mean, it was we were doing really exciting things in the city. There's 34 cities in Orange County. We had really started focusing on impacting those cities more. Plans to multiply and do a new congregation. So a lot of great and exciting things were happening right before the pandemic began.
Yeah, and then you got your notebook out from the class in seminary on
Yep.
leading through a pandemic, right?
Oh man, it was the first couple months. I mean, you remember those time when you did not yet know somebody who had COVID. So and then also you didn't know how long this was going to last. I remember we spent so much time in meetings, planning on a reopening in May, and then and Father's Day, and then the second week in July. We kept pushing things back because California really just waves of stay-at-home orders and those kinds of things took place throughout California. So those first couple months were probably the least fun, only because there wasn't a lot of clarity. I think I'm having a lot more fun now that even though things aren't what they were, there's a lot more clarity. And so we have the plays that we are running. Early we said we were going to have 4 different plays, like a coach calls a play based on what the defense gives them. And so we had 4 different plays online, home gatherings, play 2, play 3. We started these different neighborhood gatherings, so smaller gatherings throughout Orange County, and then play 4, back to gathering fully at Mariners congregation. So now that we have all 4 plays going and we're able to pivot within the plays and give more attention to one or the other based on what's taking place with the virus, it's been a lot more fun because the strategies is in play, and we're just able to kind of pivot within the strategy as opposed to having to pivot to a brand new strategy.
Wow. So let me ask you this. Travel back in time with me to February, March, and pretend you could visit with yourself back then, short of telling them exactly how the current events would unfold. Hey, it's going to last this long. So, like, what are some lessons you've learned that God's been teaching you about? Maybe it's your preaching style, maybe it's engaging people, maybe it's what are just some things that come top of mind that you're like, I wish I had known this going into all of this mess.
Yeah, there's a book I read called A Beautiful Constraint, and it was really helpful. I just wish I had read it about a month earlier. And essentially, when a constraint hits, it's an organizational book, a business book, but it was really helpful for me about when a constraint hits you. You really have 3 different approaches. You can be a victim and essentially lower the mission of the organization, in our case, the ministry. You can be one who works around the restraint. So you actually are gonna still be driven, and you're just gonna find ways to work around it. But the third would be you're gonna be a transformer. You're gonna actually use the constraint as something beautiful. And this is really is I don't know if the author realized this, but really is a Christian perspective that the trial is going to result in some beautiful fruit, that there's going to be something the Lord does through this that is going to be beautiful in the end. And so when I got to that mindset, William, things just became more fun, more liberating, began to be more future focused. How are we going to be able to better serve the body of Christ and reach people with the gospel because of this? Not let's figure out how to serve people in spite of this, but how can we can have the mindset that no, this is actually in the end going to be beautiful, and we're going to serve people in new ways because of this. That is there any way we can at the end of this be grateful for this season because of this happening? And when I got to that place, it was just a lot more fun, and I think a lot more healthy and a lot more fruitful and a lot better for the church that I'm responsible for. So if I could go back to that self, I would just say, let's get here faster. Let's get to this kind of mentality quicker.
That's good. I was talking to a friend of mine, Chris Hodges, who said it was when he got past well, let's just deter it long enough to get to like when he started to take the longer view, like we're going to be here a while. So how do we?
Yep, I agree with that.
And everything's contextual. You're Southern California. I mean, yeah, you're gathering. I read somewhere that one of your gatherings was maybe one of the largest gatherings of people in Orange County.
Don't tell anybody that. We're not telling anybody that. Where'd you read that? Yeah. I'm joking. No, it is. It probably is. But it's outside, William. It's outside.
But that's the thing. And people don't realize, I have a picture that I keep of Rick Warren and me. I've a lot of pictures of Rick, but I have one of us standing outside his church in the rain. And I'm like, we need a picture of this because it doesn't happen. So you got a little more freedom there. But let's pull that context aside. Forget the mass gathering. What would be some transferable, tactile things that you're saying? Here's some of the fruit that we've seen. Here's something that could encourage a pastor who might be in a different setting. Here's a way you can minister because of and through this in a way that may not have been possible without the pandemic.
Yeah, I'll give a couple of things that we did. I'm trying to figure out how to make it most transferable. Okay, this is this would be transferable. We looked at when I say we, the leadership team that I'm a part of, with them, we looked at goals that we had, that we really believe the Lord had given us, things we wanted to see happen in our church that he'd given before the pandemic. And then, theologically, we're saying, okay, God exists outside of time. So it's not like if we really believe these are from the Lord, it's not like the Lord gave these and then the pandemic, came up. But no, because God exists out of time, he saw these goals and the pandemic with equal clarity and equal
Wow.
vividness. He saw
Wow.
both at the same time. So with him giving those, how then does the pandemic actually help us escalate or better see these happen? And so that transferable principle would be, if you have some things that the Lord really clearly gave you, he gave those to you outside of time. He saw those and the pandemic at the same time. So how does the pandemic perhaps even spur you on to run after those with a greater sense of conviction? And just some practical things for us. One of those was we wanted to serve the cities in Orange County at a deeper level. Well, a pandemic, I mean, it created us partnerships that we didn't have before. A couple of things that we've been able to do. We did free childcare for healthcare workers early in the pandemic.
Wow.
We started a program in the afternoons for single moms who there was no way they could educate their kids via Zoom and do their job. So we this fall we did free programming for kids in the afternoons. We are taking our Christmas messages into 50 senior living facilities in Orange County and via iPads from bed to bed to serve these senior living facilities. So it just caused us to figure, okay, that we really believe the Lord gave us this dream, this goal. How's the pandemic help us, accomplish that more? Another one was we had a desire before the pandemic to really ramp up our next gen, what we're doing with teenagers and kids. So we started we call it the Big Picture Show for kids online. But when we started gathering, we started doing a watch party with kids, and it's turned out to be this huge hit with families where it's outside on the lawn, spread out, but it's a consistent thing that they have in their lives that they can come to. Another example is I had a plan to do basically some robust type of theology training for the people in our church. In my mind, William, this was going to be like a 3-year plan. When the pandemic hit, I thought, man, what a better time. There's people who can't. This was in the summer when people weren't going anywhere. So I started teaching via Zoom systematic theology. We had 950 people in our church go through systematic theology, and then we called it a deep dive, and then we launched several new deep dives. And I'm teaching one tonight on the meta narrative of Scripture that called the Story of God. So anyway, those are just some tangible examples. But the thinking was, instead of looking at the pandemic as a bad thing, were these goals really from the Lord? If so, then how can we run more fiercely after them because of the pandemic?
That's so good. That's so good. I was talking to so like we help churches find their key staff, right? So
You do. You just helped us with our children's pastor.
that actually, I know God keeps a record of things, but I'm actually kind of taking like a children's pastor search in the middle of a pandemic.
You did it, man.
Only God. Only
That's
God.
why we paid you. We paid you because of that.
Well, no. So all that's to say, we have weird conversations around our office, and I had a pastor call me talking about job titles in the middle of a pandemic, and I think I need to change our like our missions, like vision and missions pastor title. That's why currently his title is pastor of spreading. I'm like, no, it's not. He said,
Yeah.
well, tell me more. We got to change. I said, is this volunteer, like his dream team? Is that the super spreaders? So long way of saying, pastors have not just had to say we can't meet.
Yeah.
There've been some things you have to say, we got to stop doing that for right now, or maybe forever. Have you guys found things that you're like, aside from mass gatherings because of proximity, that you're saying, I don't know that we need to do that right now?
Yeah, there's definitely been some events that we would have had that we have not done. And right now, when we're recording this, we've gone through a major spike in California, in Southern California as well. And so we're really trying to cut. We are cutting back on some of the ancillary things. Like our staff is mainly work from home right now, just to protect the Christmas services that are on the horizon. So we've ebbed and flowed from that a bit. I think that the highest we've got to in the fall was about 35% of our staff in the office. So we were rotating people, not having a full office, just realizing that if, one person got it, it could spread to a bunch of people in the office. So we really have been as cautious as we can, but still doing ministry. We've had staff get it as well, just like a lot of my friends have had staff get it. And gosh, by the time this is aired, more likely will have gotten it. I mean, again, back to the spring when none of us knew someone who had it. Now everyone has someone in their family who's had it, um, or a close friend, and it it's a real virus, right? So,
Oh yeah.
but we definitely. I mean, I remember one time in the spring, Governor Newsom at that time was warning Californians that there would be 3 million people who would die, and we had a real tearful staff meeting one time where we did the percentages and we thought, oh my goodness, that's going to be 300 to 350 people in our church that are going to die, and how are we going to do memorials or funerals for them over a couple week period of time? And by God's grace, we are not there. So while the virus is a real deal, it's not what we feared it would be in terms of death rates and all in the. It's not what we feared in the spring. Again, I don't know what it will be like when this is airing, but it's
Right.
not yet been what we feared it would be when it first happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the things, I'm sure you've been asked this a bunch. I'm asking all the guests in this series. One of the things when you move to a town, now you had 18 months to get to know people. I watch you on social. We stay connected. I know you've got small group, you've got kids group, you've got all kinds of things. But like, how are you engaging with people you haven't met before? So deep dive, I guess, is one of them. But like, and I'm asking that for a reason, not just to pry into your life, although that's always fun, but to help those who are going to a church right now, and they're like, I don't even know how to begin to meet people.
Yeah, it's to me it's the biggest challenge of the season, because a lot of times it feels like it's one way communication.
Mm,
So like the deep dive tonight, there'll be a ton of people on this digital Bible study I'm leading, and it doesn't feel like I'm having a dialogue with them. I try to do creative things, like I have a burner cell phone just for the Bible study, and I'll put the number on the bottom of the screen, and people can text me questions. At our physical gatherings, I'm not in the green room. I'm out spending time with people. I have a mask on and that sort of thing. But I'm trying to be as present as this time allows you to be. It's what I miss the most. I really miss the patio conversations between services. It was one of my favorite things my first 18 months here. Um, and I think the meeting new people, William, has ebbed and flowed based on the season of what COVID's doing to a local community. The fall here was more open, restaurants, beaches, um, those gathering kind of spots were open. They're not, beaches still are, but restaurants are not. And so we were out and about. We did definitely meet more of our neighbors during this time than we had pre-COVID. So that's been a blessing.
yeah.
Um, but I say, man, it's the most challenging part of this.
Well, I've said this a bunch now, but I've done a cursory study of pandemics, and I've found the one common denominator among all of them. They all end.
Amen.
So, I mean, hadn't had one yet that hadn't ended. So it will end. And it just kind of turn a corner as we enter the last segment. What are you going to do differently? Let's pretend we get back to normal, whatever that means. Like, and maybe that's in the fall when we go back to school. Maybe it's longer, maybe it's shorter. I don't know. But like your room's full again. Okay, whew, that's over. What are you going to say? You know what? My approach has changed because of this, and I'm tweaking my ministry.
Yeah. Hopefully those the great things that we saw the Lord do, that we retain those. So those neighborhood gatherings, we're hoping that some of those turn into congregations. The theology things that we've done online, we have plans to codify those and operationalize those and have a have a, a cycle that people go through in terms of those studies. Our digital initiatives, things that we've started online, I don't see us um, viewing digital now as just this temporary thing, but as definitely a part of our, you know, of how people access our church. In the retail space, people for years have used the term omni-channel or unified commerce, where you basically unified commerce, where you basically you enter Best Buy, but you could have started your purchase on your phone. That there's interplay. You might buy online, you might be in the store, and if you go to the store, you might just do buy online, pick up in store. You might ship from the store. A constant interplay between the brick and mortar and the e-commerce. Church is not that. We're not a business. We're not an organization, but there is a transferable learning that I think people are going to toggle back and forth a bit between physical and digital.
Wow.
And so basically wanting to have our offerings both physical and digital, even after the pandemic's over, so that people, a guy who travels during the week for his job can attend the Bible study from his laptop in his hotel room, when he's in Phoenix. That kind of thing we weren't thinking about near as intentionally as I believe we will be after this.
That's great. Final subject. You're so good. I know you work hard, but I also know you play hard and rest hard and keep a good balance with Kay and the kids. Any words of learning that you've had over the last season that you might pass on to people that are entering a new chapter in ministry?
As far as with time with the family?
Yeah. The first parish, right?
Yeah, it's been a sad, there's possibilities of really sad times for our kids, because they've had some things ripped from them. So Kay and I have tried to, first protect our time together and our, the times that we get to spend. The kids going back to school this fall has been huge for us, because on my day off, we get that whole day, which is great. But then when it comes to the kids, trying to find some things that will actually be a good memory for them from the pandemic. So just like I'm trying to lead our team to think, what are some great things on the other side of this? For the kids, Kay spent a couple $100 and put a rock climbing wall on the side of our house. So that trying to find some things that are fun, are fun for them, that they can look back and enjoy. So I hate cold water. I spent 8 years in Miami, but my daughters are getting interested in surfing. So I have got a wetsuit, and I've taken surf lessons with them to try to, but at the end of the pandemic, if they've learned how to rock climb and learned how to surf, then we'll be in good shape.
And you'll probably have met your deductible, but that's
another. Dude, I it's funny you say that. I hyperextended my knee and sprained my ankle already. I am a disaster.
Well, Eric, I'm so thankful for what you're doing in Southern California. It's Mariners, if you don't know it, is really, I think, one of the best kept secrets in American Christendom. Your predecessor, Kenton, just really kind of was so bought into local ministry at the local front that a lot of people hadn't heard of it. So go check out Mariners, and is it marinerschurch.org?
Yes.
Yeah. And, we'll put all that in the show notes. We'll put a link to Eric's blog, great leadership lessons there, his social, so you can follow him and see him in a wetsuit and, swollen knees and all the things that happen. And if you don't get those show notes, go to vandercast.com, and that'll put you on an email list that won't beat you up with a bunch of other stuff, just kind of the show notes and all. Eric, it is so good to talk to you, and we're praying for you. We're believing in you. And thanks so much for making time for us today.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for inviting me.